God who gives, who expects, who blesses. Amen. Amen. We had a busy weekend at our annual diocesan convention. Carolyn was here with me, and so was Deb, who's not with us this morning. But we had a busy time, didn't we, Carolyn? A lot happened, and it was really a wonderful gathering. It was a really different atmosphere. If you've ever been to a diocesan convention, just a whole lot of joy. It was our first in-person meeting of the diocese since COVID. So it was really nice to see so many people from all different parts of the diocese that we hadn't seen in quite a while, maybe since our bishop's consecration service, if you got to that. And there were a couple of places that got particular attention. And one of those places was leaving a legacy for the future. And there was a workshop about it, and the bishop called on people who had put their church or any church in their will, asked us to stand up. That was a little awkward. But she said, you know, these people are examples in the faith and for the church, because how is the church going to continue without people leaving a legacy of what they believe, what they've done, and what they're able to give? So, yeah, all right. And if you look at the letter from Paul to Timothy, this second or third or however many times he wrote to Timothy, and whether or not this was actually Paul or somebody later paying tribute to Paul, Paul is leaving his legacy of his teachings, of his example, to Timothy, a young leader in the church, who is mentioned in several of Paul's letters, saying, you know, Timothy's here with me, or I'm sending Timothy to you with this letter, or, you know, Timothy is an active part of Paul's ministry. And now the writer is saying, I'm nearing the end of my work. I am about to be made an offering fully to God. My soul is about to be poured out as an offering. We know from hints that Paul drops in his messages and other places that Paul wound up his life in Rome under arrest, under house arrest, and there's a tradition that he was martyred in Rome. Nobody put it down in their record book, though. Today, chopped off the head of one guy named Saul, or maybe it's Paul. We don't have that. So there's this tradition among the Christians in Rome, but that's a strong tradition. And Paul is telling Timothy, I know it's not going to go well for me, but I'm ready to go. I am ready to go. Those of us who have had times when we've been given a diagnosis, or somebody we love has been given a diagnosis, and we have to wonder, am I ready to go? Are they ready to go? What is it if I had to write a final email or a final letter or a final note? What would I want to tell the people I have been with? Not only about my life, my work, but what about my faith? What about my faith community? What have I been trying to teach them? Who have you learned from in your faith journey? A parent, a grandparent, a godparent, a teacher? Who has taught you the legacy they want you to take with you about what it means to live courageously and well? Many of us can name the people who we followed in their faith journeys or in their teachings or in their life story. That's why we pay attention to the saints, for instance. Many of us could say, my grandmother was a saint. And maybe that is true, and that's in that whole big sense of all the baptized are saints of God. And then there are people who make it onto the church calendar, who we say, this was really somebody who showed the faith in their life. Let's remember them. And then there are other people who may be quieter in their gifts, but, you know, somebody remembered in this book of remembrance of St. George's who left things for here, who gave the Eucharistic candlesticks. Mr. and Mrs. Newman gave Eucharistic candlesticks way back in 1948. Or in 1962, Margaret Hunt left the lectern Bible and Grace Fraser left the lectern. And somebody else left chairs. And somebody started paying for the organ. And somebody else, all these saints of St. George's left legacies for us to enjoy. And sometimes their names are remembered and their stories are remembered. And sometimes they fade from that storytelling because of different people remembering and then people forgetting. But this book remembers a lot of them. So I'm going to leave this out at coffee hour and with clean fingers. Take a look. Really happy that the ECW is providing coffee hour today, too. So you can have good food and some good memories. We're entering that time of year when we remember the saints who have gone before us. Early November, All Saints, All Souls. And if you have someone who died recently or you want to be remembered in the prayers for November 6th, it's time to start sending those over to the office. But also the saints of St. George's are remembered and their legacy in books and in stories. The legacy that you will give, what will that be? What will you leave for those who come afterwards? The bishop asked during dinner, she said, I'm going to give a toast to everyone who has put a church in their will. And those of us who have done that stood up and felt a little sheepish about it. And she said, next year I want more people standing up. Not who have died, but who are planning to die one day. Are you planning to die one day? I hope so. We're all going to do it. But what will be your legacy? What will be your legacy in word, in deed, and in money to continue what you have believed? Sometimes we get to comparing ourselves to others. We think, oh, I don't have very much. We heard some amazing stories as part of the convention. One fellow told a wonderful story about in his previous diocese, they did evensong once a month, and somebody just walked in from the street and sat in the back and really seemed to enjoy it. And every time they would have evensong, this person would wander in and would leave soon after. Nobody really got to know him, and he kind of seemed shy, didn't want to talk to other people. And he kind of vanished for a month or so. And then they got a check one day for $250,000 from somebody like, who is this person? Who's this Joe Schmo or whatever his name was? And they were asking around. They finally figured out it was the guy who came to Evensong, who never really wanted people to know about him. And yet his church experience had made a huge difference, obviously, in his life. And because of his gift, they were able to begin a whole new ministry with that gift. How wonderful. But most people are not going to leave $250,000. Sorry, I can't. I'm not going to have that. But I'm going to leave 1/10 of whatever I have. And you can do that so easily. But you have to make it clear that you want to do that. I think I've told you before this story of a person in my husband's church who had been virtually funding a huge proportion of their budget and was expecting to write up an endowment thing, had to have emergency surgery, didn't survive it. His children didn't know that's what he wanted to do. And so they were happy to keep the money that he was going to give to his church. So, got to be clear. Our legacy is what keeps the faith going, Paul says to Timothy, not only in this passage, but elsewhere. If you don't have somebody to carry that forward, what's going to happen to all that work, all that teaching, all that suffering? He reminds Timothy, I almost got fed to the lions. It was only because God was with me. I was spared from the lion's mouth. That might have been literal as well as figurative. And we're not living in that kind of a situation, most of us, but who's going to carry this place onward, and how are they going to do it? Part of our time together is thinking about the things we want to pass forward, the dreams, the hopes, the challenges that we're going to start and want somebody to continue making a difference from God. And when we start comparing our own efforts to others, oh, I'm not that good, is when we get into the problem Jesus describes in the parable of the two people at prayer, the very self-righteous person and the humble tax collector who knows he was a sinner. We're all sinners. Anybody perfect in the room? No. I'm not. I don't know anybody who's perfect, actually. And the fact that the one guy had done good things with his faith was important. He tithed. And the fact that he tithed made it possible for the other humble sinner tax collector to actually be there. They're in the same church. But one guy's like, I'm glad I'm not like you. And we're in the season of that too, aren't we? I'm glad I'm not like that politician. I'm glad I don't vote that way. And as soon as we start saying, I'm glad I'm not like that person, well, we are in the same trap. Probably Jesus meant to do that when he set up this guy as the fall guy. And as soon as somebody says, well, I'm glad I'm not like that guy, oops, got you too. We're all tempted to say, well, no, at least I'm not like that. As soon as we do that, we fail to see that we're all beloved children of God. All of us are like one another. And as soon as we draw a line and said, well, I'm not like that one, Jesus is on the other side of that line, daring us to see him in the other person. So I'm not rich enough to leave a ton of money to anybody. That's okay. I will do what I can. And you may not have $500,000 to leave to St. George's, but that's okay. Leave what you can. Give what you can. Believe and have faith in fighting the good fight. What does fighting the good fight mean? We're not Christian soldiers anymore. We don't sing that hymn too much. But the fight is to show the world where our priorities are, because they get challenged a lot. They get challenged a lot to think of ourselves as better than that, or worse than that, or wanting to own that, or having to do something else with our time than what God might call us to do. Having the strength to fight that fight is where we need to land. Having the strength to say, I choose to give to my church and to these things and to these things and to these people, and that's because it's my priority. I choose to be put in the book of remembrance. I hope you are and will be. I choose to make a difference. May all of us in this year ahead, as we're doing our stewardship rumblings, remember this is a legacy year. And I hope all of you will find ways to make a difference as you can. That's all we ask. That's all we need. Because Christ is there and says, am I on the same side of the line? Yeah, he's on the same side with us. We hope and pray. No, we have confidence. Amen.
Amen.